Hi everyone. So my name is Kritika Kumar. I work in analytics at Razorpay, and this session is about our experience and learnings from the journey of improving customer experience with AI and with language models specifically, right? So let me start off with why does this need an entire presentation? We are in an age of R1, O3. Why do we need to sit here and say that the process is iterative and slow? Maybe some learnings from our journey that we can share with you. So, and I think we were all excited uh, when large language models came about, and they were our ticket out of old chatbot woes. We've all seen these chatbots. We've all struggled with them for years. We've struggled to code them. We've struggled to use them, and we've always hung up the phone and said, "I need to talk to a human agent." Right? And last year, when the tide sort of turned, we all thought, no, this is now going to get significantly better very quickly. But then our learning since then has also been that the process is going to be a little more iterative, right? I'll tell you uh, what that's been like. So again, why does this need an entire presentation, right? So um, this is a little simplistic, but what did we expect when we got the wonderful large language models for customer experience, right? We will launch a nice chatbot. Customer NPS will be happy. They're getting their answers very quickly. All the answers are prompt, no escalations. Everything will be personalized for the customer. Maybe this is just me, but uh, everything is going to go fine. But what actually ended up happening, right? So this is a generic journey. So we launch an AI chatbot, and then it starts giving customers life advice, which they don't come to your platform for. And then we scale it down. And then we enter into a long, hard slog of putting in guardrails, putting in processes, putting in safeguards, and ensuring that it is something that can actually work for your use case. And then you go to a review meeting and then they ask you, what happened? There's no progress for the last 3 weeks. Are you going to ship anything? You promise us a lot. Right? And then when you finally get something, hey, this was due 3 months ago. Right? So I think there are a lot of people who can resonate with this kind of journey. The initial expectations given to a long, hard slog of iterative, incremental improvement. And what I want to do today is just take you through some of the learnings that we've had and just help you figure out how to plan this journey. What we've learned, hopefully that can help everybody. Just plan out your journeys on customer experience a little better, right? So broadly, I'll just be talking about 4 things. First, identifying opportunities, starting small, scaling thoughtfully, and then refining the magic, right? So let me start off with identification of opportunities. So the first question that uh, we learned we should ask very early on is, what is the problem we are trying to solve? Right? We have a tool, but you know the saying, right? If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you can't just apply that fancy new tool to every problem. So first, we had to dig deep, look into our problems, and that's a journey I think all of us will have to do in every organization. So what are the most common frustrations that customers face? Where are your support teams struggling? How do users use your product? Where are you really going to make value? Where are you really going to add value from language models in your product? Right? So, just giving you a sample of the kind of process that you would follow typically in any organization, right? So, how are you listening to your customer? You have your surveys, your NPS, customer satisfaction. You have a bunch of tickets that people raise, right? You have complaints. Customers have left and gone to competition, and they've left you messages saying, "Hey, I didn't like this about your product." And you have your on-ground sales teams who talk to customers day in, day out. First thing to do, and for us and for everybody, is to listen to this and start identifying what are the core problems that customers are facing. Before we jump into anything about LLMs or AI, first thing was ensuring that we're capturing all of these properly, analyzing them properly, distilling them down to the core problems that we were facing. Right? And then the next touch point for us was, where are support teams really struggling, right? So the kind of metrics or the kind of things that you can look at are ticket resolution time. Which tickets or queries take the longest to resolve? Which ones do we say, hey, this is resolved, and then the customer comes back and no, you didn't answer my problem. This is then the ticket gets reopened. Which kind of tickets, and we've all seen these kind of tickets. They go to one team, they say, I don't know how to solve this. Let me redirect you elsewhere. Let me redirect you elsewhere. Let me redirect you elsewhere. And then they sort of goes around in a loop for weeks. Which are these problems, right? Which tickets get priority? Is your most important customer in their most urgent time of need getting the kind of priority support that they deserve? So this is another problem. This is another question that we decided to ask. And another one is there are a lot of on-the-ground learnings. You talk to anybody who handles customers, talks to customers, they will give you pages upon pages of what we should improve in our product, right? How are these being structured, distilled, organized into business and product recommendations? Is there a structure to it? Is it ad hoc? Hey, I had this problem, please fix the product. Right? Can work for one, doesn't scale. So really digging into the data um, uh, and digging into some NLP techniques, but sort of trying to distill what are the core problems, which kind of issues are people really struggling with, right? This was one very important step. The other aspect of customer experience is how are people using your product, right? And this is standard product analytics or business analytics in any way. So where are people dropping off from your funnel? What are your unhappy flows? What steps lead people to start dropping off from your product usage where they don't continue any further? Where do they have to upload documents? Where do they have to do mobile OTP validation or God forbid email OTP validation? Right? These are all problems that if you talk to any product manager, they will be able to tell you. And these problems sort of start distilling out from the data, right? Which parts are accessed most least? There are parts of everybody's product which were built with a lot of passion and enthusiasm, which never get used by anybody, right? And that happens to everybody. So, asking a lot of fundamental questions before you begin, we found to be very, very, very vital. Why? Otherwise, you end up solving something that doesn't need to be solved. And when you have something that doesn't need to be solved, you will never be able to scale that solution. You will never have adoption, you will never have cross-functional support. So nothing will fly unless you're answering key questions. Once you've asked all these questions, assume we have the data, okay? We have all the data, we've asked all the questions, we have some answers. Typically, where do language models sort of come in, right? Let's be realistic, what can and cannot be solved with language models, right? So there are repetitive chat interactions, chatbot, we all know it, great. Language model will help, okay? Customer facing agent enhancement, right? So not necessarily this is something that only a language model can solve. Simple product data insights can also help a lot, but language models have their part. They can intelligently summarize, they can suggest how an agent can respond to a customer. They can do a lot of things in addition to the data. So it is not only language models that can solve it. And we have to be realistic about what is AI or what is a language model going to solve for this problem. Right? Personalization and engagement, again, has been around for ages. So if there is any search or conversational flow, great. Language model, we can plug that in. But if it's just about ranking recommendations, it's about what to buy next, not really something I would go to a language model for. We've had algorithms to do this for ages. Right? A lot of internal process optimizations related to support ticket, categorizing them. This is about how you share the knowledge from your agents to them, categorizing support tickets, internal knowledge retrieval tools. All of these things, yes, language models can definitely make them better. Right? So when we plan before we build, we commit realistically, we know what we're attacking, and then we take a plunge together saying, this is what I will realistically solve. This I will not solve using language models. Don't expect this, just expect this. And this part is very clear, very important that we are clear about before we start the process at all. Right? So now that we have identified the opportunities, you've identified saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. Right? What are we going to do next? So I think as the slide suggests, we are big fans of pilots and proofs of concept, POCs, right? And that we feel is fundamentally the only way to really scale new and breaking tech like Gen AI, right? So how do you choose what is a pilot? You've identified a bunch of things. What does your pilot need to have? Impactful, it first needs to be impactful and low risk, right? You can summarize text, you can create quick responses for agents. Anything that is internal facing is an easier solve. Start small, start with something that is low risk. Don't directly put a chatbot in front of a customer on day two after building it, right? So there are some things where you sort of start small with low risk and medium to high impact, right? So if you have a FAQ section where you have great documentation for all your major questions, great. You can start with that to start training a chatbot. Small impact, low risk. Next one, I think I have personally learned the hard way in my career, feasible with available data. I will walk you through a scene. I was once maybe a couple of months into an AI project, and I'm sitting in a review with business leaders, and they're like, "Great, you're a couple of months in. Where are we on the project?" And I was like, "We have the data." Right? You can imagine business leaders going 2 months in, and you have the data. They say, "Get lost. Next month, I'd better see a model here. I'd better see a chatbot here." Right? And other words were said, which I will not repeat here. But uh, the point is, if you need 3 months to construct your data, to train your model, to construct a knowledge base, to train your model, don't start that for your first pilot. Right? Pick something you can do. Pick something that you can show early results of. Everybody has used ChatGPT and all the other interfaces. Everybody thinks they can do wonderful things. Nobody will wait 6 months for your first version to come out. Right? So please pick something practical, something small, so that you don't need to go out and build an entire data warehouse for or an entire new knowledge base for. Right? Measurable. So the next thing is, how will you measure this pilot? What will make this a success? How will you know that if this thing is going off the rails? If it is completely hallucinating, making up things, it is destroying your experience, how will you know? Right? How are you going to measure this? This is very important. Right? So sample ones. So if you are building a chatbot, some sample metrics that you always have, and we've always had them, are things like containment rate, which is essentially how many queries go beyond the chatbot and onto an actual agent. Is this improving or not? You will always have your customer satisfaction scores, your thumbs up, thumbs down ratings, all of those kind of things. Right? And one very important thing is, at the early stages, we should have an experimentation set up to know which variants are working, which are not. At the outset, you may not know whether a casual tone for a chatbot is going to work better or a slightly more formal tone is going to work better. Depends on your use case. So you need to have multiple variants being tested, given feedback, being measured. So you need an experimentation setup. You need to know variant 1 versus variant 2 versus variant 3. These are important things to have to measure so that you can sort of pick the successful variations, iterate, make changes, right? And lastly, you need to have, I think, cost and latency guardrails. In a pilot, you will usually not break the bank with cost guardrails, but you can never be too sure. So please bake in some guardrails or some metrics for cost, for latencies. One example from our thing was, in a pilot, we discovered that we had to categorize some information on some of our customers' websites, and the when we started doing it and we started making the API calls, the latency was around 8 seconds, and nobody is going to wait for 8 seconds in real time for your screen to load. So first iteration went great because it's on our Python notebooks. So great, works great on my notebook. So good to go. In production, 8-second latency. So these are things to sort of bake in so that you are able to track what is sort of working, what is not working, right? And now I want to come back to sort of what I call the standard operating procedure for AI improvement, right? You train, you deploy, you get weird outputs, you panic, then you make changes, and then you go back to step one and start doing it again, right? So I pretty much call this a standard operating procedure for AI development. So if you are ever panicking why my AI is saying this, it's fine. It's standard operating procedure. Don't worry, we've all been there. That's how all great products get made, right? So what do you need in how are you going to conduct a pilot now that you've chosen your pilot, right? First, you need to have a very clear objective and scope. So what is the problem that is being solved? And what does success look like? We talked about success metrics, but let me give you an example. So if I take all the tickets that come into our organization, customers sort of raise tickets, they have to be resolved. And I say the success metric of my chatbot or agent support assistant or anything is 90th percentile ticket response or resolution. Okay, P90 ticket resolution. And then I go and build my chatbot to attack the simplest queries. Do all the low hanging fruit, only do FAQs, only do basic things. I will fail because your 90th percentile queries are the most complex queries out there. You're doing nothing to tackle them. So just a choice of 20th percentile or productivity versus a 90th percentile can make a huge difference between a success and a failure. You may have a genuinely good product. Just because you chose a bad metric, it will come across as a failure later. Right? So you have to be specific about how you're going to measure what is it going to solve. If you're going to solve only the simplest of queries, success metric is probably productivity. Right? If you're going to solve the most complex queries, then you get into things like 90th percentile response or whatever, 90th percentile time, right? Reducing agent errors, right? Which ticket, which category, which cohort are you going to attack? If you're automating some process, which process? Please be very, very specific about what you're going to attack, right? Then please ensure that you have short feedback loops. How do we ensure that we have short feedback loops? Easiest one is human in the loop. Don't expose anything directly to customers yet. Have some human testing and validation for a while before it gets released, right? And we've all been there. We've seen examples, and we had this hilarious setup internally where we were reviewing a merchant has raised an escalation. My thing is not got resolved. What are you guys doing? And our internal bot is responding, "Hey, great, we've resolved all your queries. Hope you're happy. Have a nice day." Right? And there's an angry merchant, and who is just going to get even angrier after reading that response. Thankfully, we didn't. That was not something that was released externally to our customers. This was read by an agent who tagged it to us saying, "What is this rubbish?" and then sort of went and gave an actual response to the customer. So please have these human feedbacks, have the shorter feedback loops. Don't wait for a month or two to sort of measure what is going right, what is going wrong, right? And the next point is core mission team, right? A core mission team has to sit and review these metrics regularly for course corrections. Now, what is a core mission team? The core mission team is not only data science or engineering team, right? It is the business team who you're solving it with the product, with whoever you're solving it for or with, is part of the core mission team. And that will be critical to your pilot or your experiment success. Right? So if you are solving it with the customer success team, if they are not part of the pilot, this pilot is going nowhere. The product will go nowhere, nobody's going to adopt it. Right? So the core mission team has to be defined. It has to have users as well as developers. And you have to keep reviewing all the metrics that we spoke about regularly to course correct, right? And lastly, regular iterations. So the easiest example I can give you from our this thing is um, a simple query. At Rezepe, we handle lots of payments. So hey, where is the money for this payment? That can possibly have 20 to 50 different responses. Payment is already there, payment is made, but it's stuck here, payment is not here. There are a bunch of different responses. So just knowing the intent from the language is not enough to figure out what has to be done. And often it becomes a many-to-many mapping of intent to a resolution. So mapping these out in detail is very, very crucial um, to ensure that you have the right sort of response mechanism in place, right? And we talked about experimentation again. Now, Now you've done your pilots, you've identified what works, you've identified what doesn't work, right? And now you're saying, now let us start scaling this. How do we scale this? How do we make this big? I want everybody to adopt it, right? So all my customer facing engagement should go through this. What are the kind of things that we need to keep in mind when we do this, right? So first of all, I asked this question again earlier. Are you solving what the business needs solved? The sad fact about most AI and ML projects is that they sit in your notebook and they die in your notebook. Most things don't see the light of day because they are not aligned with business goals, because they're not aligned with your business's priorities, because they're not aligned with what the product or business wants you to do. And it is very, very important to have your projects aligned with business goals. To walk up to them and say, hey, your goal is customer experience. This project is going to improve this. This is what I'm doing. I hope we are all aligned. I hope we are one team tracking this and driving this, right? How are you going to measure success and ROI? Very important to resolve, right? So we made a lot of investment on this model. This is what we're training. This is what we're doing. How am I going to measure success, right? Again, this needs to be discussed with the user teams. Very important. Review, adjust, and report. We've already sort of covered it. But again, this is also very important in this phase. Next is designing your solution now for scale. You'll notice until now made no mention of model choice. When you're doing a pilot or a proof of concept, again, it's just that. You're just proving that the concept works, right? So now these things start becoming much more important. What is your model choice going to be, right? So, uh, of course, you can have large language models for everything. But one of the discussions that we keep having internally is, what if you have 10 instructions for a chatbot? Yes, great, prompt work. 50 instructions, they work. 500 may not work. What kind of architecture will you need to support a mature state responder system? Right? So these are questions that you have to solve. You have to start asking when you're scaling that solution now. Right? So in where do you need a dynamic setup, hybrid setup, general understanding, large model, routing to very, very specific small models, hypothetically, right? So do you need this kind of setup? These are the questions to start asking once your pilot is successful, right? And um, next is, again, all your context grounding. So how are you going to do it? How are your prompts going to be structured? Um, Again, our problem earlier was how long are we going to keep adding things to the prompt? They keep increasing the context window. So far, we have not run into that barrier yet. But this is again a question that you have to start asking at this stage. How are we going to structure this when this is scaled up to much larger sort of setup? Right? Latency considerations, sort of your cloud, you want to host models in-house, how do you want to do it? The very interesting thing that we had to do as we scaled was pre-computes, caching responses, caching standard responses, so standard kind of question. Saved us a lot of latency, saved us a lot of cost as we started scaling the model to larger and larger um, uh, user base. Um, how is it going to integrate with existing infra? And this is a point I'll touch upon a little more. Very importantly, you have to find the users of your language models or AI where they are. If they have to log in onto a different website, upload a different CSV file, download something, and then read it and make sense of it, you will not see traction internally. This product management 101. Reduce your barriers of usage of your product for the internal users. So if you have a CRM and you have an intelligent support assistant internally, it has to be integrated into that CRM. Most CRMs today offer that functionality, right? Collaboration tools, Slack bots, right? You have to find your users where they are on the surfaces they use, not make them break their workflow and come somewhere else and sort of retrieve responses, right? Minimize disruptions. Don't change their processes immediately. Unless there is a very tearing hurry to change that process, please don't change the process. Integrate it into the existing processes. The more seamless you make adoption, the easier the users will sort of adopt it. This is this sort of product management 101. Last thing I want to just touch upon is we spoke about pilots. We spoke about starting small. Now, how do we expand these use cases? How does this get big? Rather, scale is one thing, but how does it do more and more things, right? So, what we have to start asking is what more can be solved with the same core that we have, right? So, let's talk about one use case that I mentioned, which is ticket handling. So, in ticket handling, the easiest pilot you would start with is just making a summary of tickets, of resolutions. Easy one for internal reference, not very controversial, can't go wrong, right? Next step, this works. You want to scale. Now you want to start categorizing issues and you want to start recommending responses to your agents on their screen as soon as their ticket is raised. As soon as they open a ticket, it recommends, hey, you should do this. You get feedback, this pilot is successful, you scale this. Then next step, it actually starts resolving the cases. And then for complex cases, it sort of triages the cases and gives you a response saying, hey, this is how you can do it, but I'm not going to resolve it for you, right? Another interesting addition to this in the next iteration could be you prioritize issues proactively with AI. You sort of have ticket queue management with AI, simple tickets resolved with AI. Maybe only the complex ones really go to the agents, right? Each of them has to have a value proposition in itself, has to be established and successful as a pilot, right? And all the process that we sort of discussed so far has to be done for all of those steps. But if you do it and if you explore adjacencies properly, step by step, we can ramp up to significantly more complex use cases, right? Talk about customer communications, right? Customer communications, we've all used email generators, so generic email generators. Uh, you can have maybe custom email generators with some basic customer context, right? Next step, you start exploring use cases. You want to talk to customers for cross sell, you want to talk to them for support, you talk to them for this. How do I customize the tone for my company tone, the context from my company context? How do I customize it in the next one? So that internally, again, this is all human in the loop, right? You're not sending anything out directly, right? Next phase to this would be, when should I send out that email, right? So that is where your personalization or propensity model kind of thing comes in, saying, hey, this customer seems very engaged right now. Maybe that customer would like to explore some of our other products. It's a great opportunity for a cross sell, right? And it also gives you the mailer. This is an email you could send to that customer, right? And the last step to this could be, it sends out the email directly, right? So if you iterate and explore each step, and each step is a viable product, viable solution in itself that people can use, then you will sort of easily scale. Uh, Sorry, I shouldn't say easily. Then you will scale in some way through different stages and arrive at the kind of thing that people dream of when they first start using AI, right? But if you start promising them stage 4 from the get go, you will only end up with sort of failure, right? Last bit I will leave you with is refining the magic. This is sort of more general, is not specific to customer experience, but I will just cover it quickly anyway, right? So first thing is monitor and address risks, right? Um, and we know this is sort of, by now, this is sort of common knowledge for everyone. You have security, you have to prevent prompt injections, you have to handle all the hallucinations that the model will do. You have to prevent it from giving general life advice to people, right? Compliance and privacy, you should not have personally identifiable information in the model at all, in the training data or knowledge base for the model, and should ensure it never comes out as well, right? Bias. I think there are less obvious forms of bias in an enterprise environment that we have to tackle. I think to a large extent, the larger providers of language models have taken care of societal biases to a large extent. But there are smaller biases in an enterprise setting. Your agents could have closed tickets of small merchants or small, not less important customers, as it were, in a more short or curt kind of way. You don't want your model learning that. You want to give the same treatment to everybody because now you can, right? So there are less obvious biases in our data that we will have to maybe sort of address, right? Given that the larger general societal biases are usually taken care of well by the larger providers, right? Um, and again, AI way of life, again, not specific to customer experience, but this is something that is specific to most AI use cases. So every department in the organization has to have this training. Every department should have an AI champion, should explore their particular use cases from customer experience, marketing to operations. Every department needs to have AI champions. Every department should have their pilot projects and sort of create playbooks. And I mentioned already, right? So when we started off with customer experience, the customer success team is part of that core mission team driving that pilot or project, right? So they are helping us fine tune our models, our responses, our prompts, right? And everybody's sort of strategy roadmap, what I'm going to do for the business teams, should contain sort of AI initiatives. This should not be something that only a data science or an engineering kind of function should contain, right? And when it becomes a way of life, when every sort of monthly review tracks saying, hey, our business goals are this is how our AI projects are going, becomes a way of life, that is when true scale will be achieved, right? That is when it becomes a way of life for everybody, right? So that's it from me. So in summary, please identify the opportunities well. Look into your data, hear your customers, identify your opportunities well. Start small, scale thoughtfully, and then sort of keep refining that magic, right? And hopefully we all get to the promised land. Right? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Murli.